I did a video a year and a half ago about white privilege. It started blowing up again a couple weeks back and now has over 900,000 views. Quite a few people have dropped by to tell me how ignorant I am. When I ask them to describe my privilege, they say that I don't get pulled over by police as often as a black person would, that I don't get followed around by a manager in a store. I wish I would. I can never find anybody to help me. One guy told me that I proved my white privilege by not noticing it. Quote, "Privilege is invisible to those who have it," unquote. So I thought, if white privilege is invisible, maybe African Americans don't see their black privilege. I'm the helpful sort, so let me go ahead and point it out. This is the dictionary definition of privilege: a special right, advantage, or immunity granted or available only to a particular person or group. Give me a few minutes. I'll demonstrate that black privilege does exist. But first, let me be perfectly clear that for the vast majority of African Americans, no such privilege has ever been asked for. But since half of white America is dead set on making black people into permanent victims, I think it's time to list a few of the special rights, advantages, and immunities that are only available to blacks. Okay, I'll address this to the black Americans who think they have no advantages. Here we go. 10 examples in no particular order. Hip-hop music. If you're white and want to be in a band and get some chicks and popularity, you have to spend hundreds of hours learning to play an instrument or sing. Then you have to find other players, soundproof a garage, learn tons of songs, and eventually tour the country in a van, hoping to be noticed. If you're black, you just have to talk shit and make it rhyme. If you're charismatic or somewhat intimidating and you know a nerdy dude who can make beats, you're on your way. Physical superiority. Look at basketball and football. 80% of NBA players are black and 70% of NFL players are black. If blacks and whites each made up half of the population, you could write that off to hard work. But blacks are less than 13% of the population and whites are 72%. So with almost 3/4 of the total bodies, we can't even get to 1/4 of total basketball players. It's not quite as pathetic in football, but damn close. On average, blacks are bigger, faster, and stronger. That's called physical superiority. I'll leave it at that. Preferential hiring. Imagine that you are running a high-profile company. You have two candidates who can do the job. They're both smart, hardworking, qualified, and about the same age. They're both attractive and likable. The only difference is that one is white and one is black. Who would you choose? Name me one single profession where the black candidate doesn't have the edge. Take your time. Let me know in the comments. COVID-19 preference. For the first 10 weeks of COVID-19, all Americans were locked up, deprived of our freedoms, unable to see a concert or a sporting event or take a girl to a movie. We were all equal. And then a guy named George Floyd was killed by a white cop. Suddenly, none of the rules applied to black people. The very same people who freaked out when relatively small groups of white people protested the shutdowns in May, well, they stood and cheered for the thousands of black people who crowded the streets in the middle of June. And the new COVID spikes? Those are blamed on white people socializing. You do the math. Your own army. I wish I had an army of pretentious white people to fight my battles. I don't, but I would if I was black. Democrats are not only required to fight black people's battles, they will track down and abuse other white people who don't fight black people's battles. And if there are no battles to fight, well, they'll just make up a few and then fight them. Pretty sweet, eh? Sadly, this has proved to be very injurious to black Americans, so maybe this one isn't a privilege. The N-word. I grew up in California, so I might not be the best example, but I don't think I've ever heard a white person call a black person the N-word. I, like all white people, am not even allowed to pronounce that word in a discussion about that word. But I can't watch a black comedy show or listen to a black rapper without hearing the word constantly. Blacks say the word so often that it might be the word they say more often than any other word. But if you're white and a social justice warrior finds out that you said the N-word 15 years ago, you might as well just clean out your desk and go home. This used to apply only to non-Democrats. Democrats have their own privilege. But nowadays, they're so thirsty for blood that they sometimes eat their own. Somewhere, a very nervous Jimmy Kimmel is wondering if Adam Carolla is hiring. The idea of racism itself. There has never been a time in history when groups of humans were not judging each other as inferior. It's built into us, and it has very little to do with skin color. In Europe, white people slaughtered each other for thousands of years. American Indians slaughtered each other before they ever saw a white person. Asians were slaughtering each other too, as were black people in Africa. Tribalism and otherism is what humans do naturally, and it has more to do with culture than color. This is why I'm always saying that we should all share one culture in America. Only black people get to act as if this human problem is aimed especially at them, and to therefore make every white person eager to prove how much he likes black people. That's an advantage that no small number of blacks have turned into lucrative careers. Ask half-black Colin Kaepernick how much Nike is paying him for not playing football. He's loaded, and his knees aren't even getting ruined, except for maybe kneeling on them too much. By the way, the white suck-ups who made Colin a star will do anything to avoid talking about the problem of black fatherlessness. But Kaepernick's black dad deserted his white mom, and two white people adopted and raised him so that he could get rich, complaining about white supremacy. The cool factor. Black people set most societal trends, and everybody else tends to follow. Many white people are desperate to be more like black people. Example. All over the country, there are blues jams packed with white dudes who live and breathe the music developed by black dudes. And because the number of black blues players is small these days, the white dudes bend over backwards to get the black dudes on stage as much as possible. In some ways, every black person gets a little bit of credit for the blues, and for jazz, and for funk, and for rock and roll too. Black people invented almost all of what can be called American music, but not all black people invented it. Thinking that all people of a certain color should be credited or blamed for what some people of that color did is, well, racist. You are allowed to riot. Black privilege has strict rules. Black people must not be held to account for anything they do as a group. As long as they do it in numbers, white elites will write it off as a reaction to historic oppression. Since the George Floyd excuse came up, Marxists have hidden themselves behind African Americans. This way they can topple statues and burn down buildings at will. If there are enough black people in the crowd, no arrests will be made. The mostly white rebels of Seattle made sure that their graffiti included plenty of references to black victimology. They made sure to give a black person the bullhorn every day, and they hung a picture of Angela Davis on the police station they occupied. They even had blacks-only areas and a black warlord. They knew whose privilege was keeping the cops away. Remember the Rodney King verdict? Remember how those deadly riots were justified and called an uprising? Remember 2 years later how O.J. Simpson was given 9 black jurors because L.A. was scared to death of more rioting? Remember how he skated for those murders? Again, let me stress that most black Americans would reject this form of privilege 10 times out of 10. You were born in America. America is particularly sensitive to the history of black people. White people bear the shame of black slavery in a way that is unique in all the world. We're the only country that split itself in half and damn near killed itself off in order to abolish slavery. The Republican Party was formed to eliminate slavery. I would never make the mistake of saying that slavery was a net good for black people, but more black people have emigrated to the U.S. than were ever forcibly brought here. Why would they do that if they didn't think coming here would improve their lives? I don't see many Americans of any color emigrating to the countries from which black slaves were taken. You don't get a national holiday and a Black History Month without a lot of people in your corner. So that's just a rough outline of black privilege as it stands in America in 2020. You can keep playing this silly game with the white progressives if you want to. You can keep getting together with them to play civil rights reenactors every few years, or you can cut the crap and get busy making a good life for yourself. But you should do that knowing that apart from a few powerless losers, everybody is pulling for you. Right about now, it would probably be a good idea to trade in your resentment on some confidence. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, subscribe to our channel and then click the little bell to get notifications.